Hey everyone, let me ask you something. Have you ever said something off camera thinking no one was listening, only to realize the mic was still on? Or worse, have you ever spoken a truth so quietly that even when the mic was on, the world still tried to mute you? What happens when someone doesn't fight back with noise, but with stillness? When they don't raise their voice because they know the truth will do the talking? Today's story isn't about shouting matches or viral comebacks. It's about one woman, one sheet of paper, and one live mic that refused to go silent. This moment didn't need special effects, didn't need applause. It only needed the world to finally listen, unfiltered, unedited, unmuted. If you've ever felt dismissed, interrupted, or too emotional to be taken seriously, this one's for you. Because what happened in that studio didn't just echo through cameras, it echoed through all of us. Stick around, because what you're about to hear, it was never meant to be heard. But the mic was still on. The ceiling lights were bright, but they didn't bring warmth. They never do. They were calibrated to flatter the powerful, not comfort the overlooked. This wasn't just a studio. This was the Capital Tablet high-profile political roundtable show, known not for what was said, but for how perfectly controlled everything seemed. The day's lineup? Former Attorney General Pam Bondi and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Two women, one stage. But the atmosphere? It wasn't tension from rivalry, it was something deeper, like static before lightning. Like everyone in the room felt something charged was about to happen, but couldn't yet name it. Pam Bondi walked in first. She didn't just enter the room, she owned it. Perfectly coiffed hair, a tailored blazer sharp enough to cut silence, and a small laugh that said, "I've done this before, and I always win." She greeted the crew by name. She complimented the lighting. She adjusted her cuff just enough to flash the silver glint of an expensive watch. Everything about her was performance, a well-rehearsed dance with media systems that had always made space for her voice. From the control room, sound engineer Nathan Boyd watched her mic levels peak with each movement. Too sensitive, he thought. It was picking up even the rub of her collar against the wire. He made a note to fix it. But a production assistant named Maya, quiet but sharp-eyed, leaned in and said, "Leave it." Nathan looked at her. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Some things don't need to be fixed. Some things need to be heard. 10 minutes later, Jasmine Crockett arrived. Alone. No entourage, no assistant, no stylist waiting in the wings, just her. She didn't greet with bravado. She didn't ask for adjustments. She simply nodded at the director and walked to chair 3, the same chair she had sat in months ago when her mic mysteriously failed mid-sentence. This time, she didn't come empty-handed. On her lap sat a blue folder, unlabeled, slim, closed but alive, like it had been opened, studied, and sealed with intention. When the crew offered her water, she nodded politely. When the camera guy adjusted her frame, she didn't flinch. She had memorized the faces in the studio. She remembered names. She remembered being interrupted 6 times in her last appearance. She remembered how headlines painted her as angry after defending herself. She remembered everything. Maya noticed. Everyone noticed. But no one said anything because in studios like this, silence is part of the script. From his booth, Director Marcus glanced at the show rundown. Segment 1. Immigration. Pam to lead. Note: she manages pacing better. There was no note about Jasmine. There never was. Marcus didn't argue. He was used to instructions like that. But he did remember the last time Jasmine was on. The moment she began defending public education from budget cuts, her mic crackled, dropped out, and Nathan wrote an apology email that the network never let him send. Today, Jasmine wasn't here to repeat history. Today, she had brought the folder. As the amber "on air in 3 minutes" light flicked on, something shifted in the room. Not panic, not fear, just gravity. Like the space between these two women had suddenly gained weight. Like someone, somewhere, had just hit record, not just on the cameras, but on truth itself. And it was then, as Nathan watched the soundboard light up and Maya hovered near the cue cards, that they both realized the mic was still on. And this time, no one was going to turn it off. The ceiling lights were bright, but they didn't bring warmth. They never do. They were calibrated to flatter the powerful, not comfort the overlooked. This wasn't just a studio. This was the Capitol Tablet high-profile political roundtable show, known not for what was said, but for how perfectly controlled everything seemed. The day's lineup? Former Attorney General Pam Bondi and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. 2 women, 1 stage. But the atmosphere? It wasn't tension from rivalry, it was something deeper, like static before lightning. Like everyone in the room felt something charged was about to happen, but couldn't yet name it. Pam Bondi walked in first. She didn't just enter the room, she owned it. Perfectly coiffed hair, a tailored blazer sharp enough to cut silence, and a small laugh that said, "I've done this before, and I always win." She greeted the crew by name. She complimented the lighting. She adjusted her cuff just enough to flash the silver glint of an expensive watch. Everything about her was performance, a well-rehearsed dance with media systems that had always made space for her voice. From the control room, sound engineer Nathan Boyd watched her mic levels peak with each movement. Too sensitive, he thought. It was picking up even the rub of her collar against the wire. He made a note to fix it. But a production assistant named Maya, quiet but sharp-eyed, leaned in and said, "Leave it." Nathan looked at her. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Some things don't need to be fixed. Some things need to be heard. 10 minutes later, Jasmine Crockett arrived. Alone. No entourage, no assistant, no stylist waiting in the wings, just her. She didn't greet with bravado. She didn't ask for adjustments. She simply nodded at the director and walked to chair 3, the same chair she had sat in months ago when her mic mysteriously failed mid-sentence. This time, she didn't come empty-handed. On her lap sat a blue folder, unlabeled, slim, closed but alive, like it had been opened, studied, and sealed with intention. When the crew offered her water, she nodded politely. When the camera guy adjusted her frame, she didn't flinch. She had memorized the faces in the studio. She remembered names. She remembered being interrupted 6 times in her last appearance. She remembered how headlines painted her as angry after defending herself. She remembered everything. Maya noticed. Everyone noticed. But no one said anything because in studios like this, silence is part of the script. From his booth, Director Marcus glanced at the show rundown. Segment 1. Immigration. Pam to lead. Note: she manages pacing better. There was no note about Jasmine. There never was. Marcus didn't argue. He was used to instructions like that. But he did remember the last time Jasmine was on. The moment she began defending public education from budget cuts, her mic crackled, dropped out, and Nathan wrote an apology email that the network never let him send. Today, Jasmine wasn't here to repeat history. Today, she had brought the folder. As the amber "on air in 3 minutes" light flicked on, something shifted in the room. Not panic, not fear, just gravity. Like the space between these 2 women had suddenly gained weight. Like someone, somewhere, had just hit record, not just on the cameras, but on truth itself. And it was then, as Nathan watched the soundboard light up and Maya hovered near the cue cards, that they both realized the mic was still on. And this time, no one was going to turn it off. Silence used to be Jasmine Crockett's enemy. Not anymore. As the final syllables of Pam Bondi's whispered jab faded, always playing the victim, no one spoke. Not the host, not the crew, not Jasmine. But something shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was inevitable. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't reach for a comeback or raise her voice. Instead, she reached for something far more powerful. Her blue folder. She opened it calmly, like someone who had already lived this moment 1,000 times in her mind. 1 page. Just 1. She didn't wave it in the air. She didn't read it aloud. She simply unfolded it, smoothed the crease with her palm, and placed it in the center of the round table dead center, right near the microphone. Everyone in the room leaned forward without moving. The host blinked, uncertain. Pam narrowed her eyes. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly tight. Jasmine didn't answer the question. Instead, she offered something far more devastating. "I think the audience at home has heard enough," she said. "The question now isn't how I'll respond. It's how you're going to deal with the truth that just slipped through the system." She wasn't angry. She wasn't trembling. She was still, with the kind of stillness that forces the room to slow down and see. Pam leaned forward. "Don't pull a morality stunt here," she hissed. Jasmine tilted her head. "I'm not performing," she said. "You are, and this time, the mic can't be edited for you." Boom. No music. No dramatic score. Just a sentence that stopped the air in its tracks. Camera 2, unmanned but tracking motion, slowly zoomed in on Jasmine's hand as it rested on the folder, steady, assured, silent. Inside the control booth, Director Marcus whispered, "Don't cut. Don't transition. Let it sit." Nathan, still watching the audio waveform, didn't touch a single knob. He knew what this was. He'd waited years for this. The host looked down at the document. A few lines into it, he froze. It was a media training memo from an organization where Pam Bondi served as a senior advisor. The header was crisp. The content? Cold. Apply emotional pressure. Force the opponent to react. If needed, edit to simulate loss of control. Objective. Dismantle balanced image. Push public sentiment toward perceived instability. Beneath it, a list of 3 politicians, all women of color. At the bottom, one name stood alone. Pamela Bondi. Final sign-off. 3 weeks ago. The host's fingers trembled as he turned to Pam. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Pam tried to laugh, but it didn't land. "I've never seen this before," she said too quickly. "Maybe someone used my name." Jasmine's voice was calm. "The document was sent from an internal email within your organization. The IP address has been verified. The timestamp matches a Zoom meeting you attended. If necessary, I can provide the source." Pam's smile cracked. "You're fabricating this? This is a trap. The media's being manipulated." Still, Jasmine didn't rise, didn't escalate. She simply closed the folder gently, like someone placing a lid on a box that no longer needed to stay open. The host cleared his throat. "Before we move on, is there anything you'd like to say?" Jasmine turned slightly, not to Pam, but to the audience watching behind the cameras. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the mic caught every word. "I didn't come here to prove I'm right. I came to show that some things shouldn't be dismissed simply because they come from a voice not conditioned to be trusted." Silence. Pure, raw, earned silence. Not because no one had anything to say, but because everyone knew the truth had just been spoken, and this time, the mic didn't flinch. The control room didn't breathe. Maya, standing behind the camera wall, whispered into her headset, This is what clarity sounds like." And out on the internet, social media erupted. A 15-second clip of Pam's whisper went viral within minutes. Did she just say that on live television? Another clip showed Jasmine sliding the paper across the table. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg for space. She just let the mic do the work. The clip was only 15 seconds long. Pam's voice, low and dismissive, always playing the victim. "We know this game." Then Jasmine's hand, calm, controlled, sliding one folded page across the table like it held the weight of a courtroom. No yelling, no theatrics, no need. The mic had caught everything. And by the time the studio lights dimmed, the moment had already escaped the building. It was everywhere. The hashtag number Unmuted America trended within 40 minutes. Then came number Folder of Truth, a single phrase that started appearing beneath reposted video clips, think pieces, poetry slams, and dorm room whiteboards. TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, it didn't matter the platform. The moment resonated not because it was viral, but because it was real. It wasn't staged. It wasn't packaged. It wasn't polished for spin. It was raw. And for once, raw wasn't edited out. In a college media class at NYU, A professor scrapped the planned lecture and played the clip instead. She asked her students one question. Does anyone here think this moment needs background music? No one answered. They didn't need to. In a small cafe in Detroit, an elderly black man watched it on his cracked phone screen. He turned to the younger man beside him and said, "She didn't raise her voice, but the whole country still stopped." In Los Angeles, a Latina barista left the video playing on the counter tablet. A customer paused, looked at the footage, and murmured, "That's what power sounds like, when it isn't loud." But the echoes didn't stop with the audience. Inside the studio's control room, Nathan Boyd, the audio technician who had left the mic untouched, sat alone after the taping. Headphones still on, fingers trembling just slightly above the mute switch he never pressed. He remembered a night 2 years ago. A black female guest had started crying on air, recalling childhood trauma. A producer said, "Cut her mic too emotional." Nathan obeyed. But the memory haunted him. Her name was Kenna. That night, she emailed him. "I didn't cry to be pitied. I cried because I knew you'd cut me, and I was right." He had never replied. But this time, he left the mic on. And when Jasmine pulled out the document, the same document Nathan had anonymously mailed to her 2 weeks prior, he knew she'd read every word. He hadn't signed it. He didn't need to. His signature was in the silence he didn't erase. Kenna, now working in a community library in Chicago, watched the broadcast from her laptop after her shift. When Jasmine laid down the paper, she put a hand to her chest, not in sorrow, but in recognition. "That's what I wrote about," she whispered to herself. "That's what they didn't let through before." She closed her eyes for a moment, not to relive pain, but to feel what it was like. To finally be heard. Across media circles, an anonymous blog post made the rounds. "I was trained to fade out women of color when they got passionate. Raise the background music. Cut to B-roll. Avoid backlash. But today, the mic stayed on. And for the first time in my career, I felt proud." No byline. Just a single icon at the bottom. By the next morning, Jasmine's office had received over 1,300 emails. Some angry, most stunned. A few came with attachments. One was a raw .wav file of the entire broadcast, tune-edited, uncompressed. Subject line: "No filters, no spin, just sound." Another had no message, only a single line in the body: "Thank you for not shrinking to fit the frame." Meanwhile, the network scrambled. The official replay was edited within 6 hours. Pam's whisper? Muted. Jasmine's document? Camera signal lost. The title changed to "A Heated Exchange Between Leaders." But it was too late. Before legal could request takedowns, someone inside the control room had already exported the raw footage. It spread like wildfire. 47 seconds. No cuts. No commentary. Just truth, uninterrupted. In a film class at Howard University, a student stood up after viewing the clip. "This isn't about Jasmine being right," she said. "It's about her not being silenced." In a high school in Kansas, a teacher paused her lesson plan to show the clip. One student wrote in their journal afterward, "It felt like someone reached through the screen and said, 'You're not too much. You were just too real for their format.'" And Jasmine? She didn't post a statement, didn't retweet the praise, didn't go on a press tour. She just showed up to work, Saturday, at her desk, and found a small note someone had taped to the corner of her monitor. "Thank you for leaving the mic on. Not because you needed it, but because we needed to hear what we're never allowed to say." No name, no signature. But somehow, it felt like all of America had signed it. Jasmine Crockett didn't hold a press conference. She didn't go live on Instagram. She didn't post a celebratory tweet. She didn't need to, because the moment had already spoken, and it hadn't needed to shout. It had simply been heard. The day after the broadcast, the network newsroom buzzed with controlled panic. Internal memos flew across departments. PR teams drafted clarification statements. The legal department requested all copies of raw footage be accounted for. But it was already too late. The clip, the unfiltered 47 seconds, was out there. Not just viral, but visceral. No spin, no studio polish. Just a whisper, a sheet of paper, and a silence that no one could interrupt. That silence became a mirror, and the country couldn't look away. In Berkeley, a group of students gathered in a local bookstore to discuss what they had seen. No professor, no structure, just chairs in a circle and a sign taped to the door. Exposing through stillness, why words don't need volume to make impact. One freshman said, "I used to think politics was about who could talk the longest, but Jasmine, she just sat there. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the room." Heads nodded. Hearts followed. In New Orleans, two older men rewatched the clip on a cracked phone screen. One said, "We used to say you had to shout just to be heard." The other nodded. But she didn't. And they still had to listen. Back in Washington, Jasmine arrived at her office just like any other day. Same steps, same routine, same chair. But something had changed. On her desk sat a single-framed message printed and taped with care by a junior staffer. "You don't need a microphone to be heard. You just need to leave it on when the truth starts speaking." Beneath it, a small, handwritten note. "Thank you for not adjusting yourself to fit their script. Thank you for holding the frequency." No name, no signature. Just the handwriting of someone who had lived in the background long enough to recognize what it means to finally be seen. Across the Capitol, a formal petition was filed to investigate bias in media training and broadcast procedures. The sponsor? A Republican lawmaker. One who had previously dismissed Jasmine in a televised debate for being too emotional. In his statement to the committee, he said only, "I still don't like how she argues, but I can't deny what I heard." Even those who didn't agree were now forced to acknowledge, because the mic hadn't picked a side. It had picked a moment. In her office, Jasmine stood in front of a whiteboard in the far corner of the room. She picked up a marker knot to plan legislation or write a speech. She just wrote one sentence. "The mic doesn't pick sides, but the person holding it can choose how they're heard." Then she capped the pen, put it down, and sat quietly at her desk. No camera rolled. No applause followed. But outside her window, the city moved differently. People didn't just share her clip, they shared their own. Stories of being silenced, labeled too angry, too soft, too unpolished. Stories of being told to adjust, perform, shrink. Jasmine's stillness had done what so few speeches ever could. It had named a feeling the nation carried but couldn't articulate. And that was her victory. Not over Pam Bondi, not over a system, but over silence itself. Later that week, Pam released a short, dimly lit video on her social media. She looked into the camera and said, "I don't recall what I said. If I misspoke, I'm sorry to anyone I hurt." No one commented. No one reposted it. Because by then, the story had moved on. It was no longer about one person's whisper. It was about the choice to stop erasing the whispers of others. And in the audio booth of the studio quiet and dark, Nathan Boyd sat alone. He adjusted his monitor. He saved a file labeled Episode Uncut Truth, Wave. Then he closed his eyes and whispered to no one. This time, I didn't turn it down. In homes, classrooms, cafes, buses, people kept watching. Not for entertainment, but for proof. Proof that sometimes you don't need to shout to be powerful. Sometimes you just need to sit still, open a folder, and let the system hear itself. And for the first time in a long time, it did. Pam Bondi left first. No security escort. No parting words. Just a quiet walk down the studio hallway. The sound of her heels echoing on polished concrete. Her face was unreadable. Her hands stayed clenched just enough to leave shallow crescent marks in her palms. No one took a photo. No one asked for a statement. No one followed her out. She stepped into a waiting SUV, and the tinted door closed behind her. Inside the studio, Jasmine remained seated. She gathered her papers slowly, methodically like a teacher closing up after the last bell of the day. She nodded at the crew one by one. No smile, no coldness either. Just recognition. Quiet dignity. The cameras were off. But the room was still listening. As she walked down the hallway, she passed by a group of interns lingering by the exit. They didn't speak. They didn't move. But one girl, maybe 11 years old, visiting with her mother, stood there wearing a t-shirt with the word unapologetic printed in silver. She hesitated, then stepped forward. "Can I take a photo with you?" Jasmine lowered herself to the girl's level, placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and nodded. The camera clicked. No flash. No pose. Just two people, one who spoke a truth, and one who had just learned it was okay to hold her own. Behind them, the girl's mother smiled, eyes glossy. "She watched you last night," she said. "This morning she told me, I want to meet the first person I've ever seen who didn't get talked over." Jasmine didn't respond with a speech. She didn't need to. She just looked the girl in the eyes and whispered, "Don't shrink." And that was enough. By the next morning, the photo was framed in the girl's bedroom, a caption written in childlike handwriting underneath. She spoke slowly, and the whole room stopped. In Jasmine's office, another photo had been hung. This one, not from a camera. It was a screenshot of a tweet. White text over black background. "You don't need a microphone to be heard. You just need to leave it on when the truth starts speaking." Underneath, someone had taped a note. No name. But it feels like all of us wrote it. Journalists kept calling. She declined every interview. Producers from CNN, Mississippi, NBC, and The View sent invites. She ignored them. Because this moment wasn't made for another round of television boxing. It was made to rest, to breathe, to settle in the minds of those who once believed their words were too soft to survive the noise. In Chicago, Kennethy woman whose breakdown had once been cut mid-broadcast stood before a group of high schoolers in a media literacy class. She played Jasmine's clip, then paused the screen right at the moment Jasmine closed the blue folder. "You see this?" she asked. "This isn't silence. This is refusal. This is, I don't have to fight your format. I am the format now." The room was silent. Then someone in the back whispered, "She made the system feel itself." Kenneth smiled. Exactly. At a staff meeting later that week, the network's executive producer asked how they had lost control of the narrative. An intern raised their hand. "We didn't lose control," they said. "We just finally let go of the mute button." The room went quiet. No one objected. Not this time. And what about Nathan? The sound engineer? He stayed behind after the cleanup crew left. He opened a private audio archive he'd kept for years. Hidden, unedited, full of truths never aired. He clicked on a folder labeled Archived Never Released, then dragged one file out. Episode Uncut Truth. Wait. He copied it to a new folder. Broadcasted. And for the first time, that space wasn't labeled fiction. It was labeled history. In the end, Jasmine Crockett didn't walk out with a trophy, a headline, or a thunderous applause. She walked out with something quieter but far more permanent. She walked out with the echo of millions of people who had been told they were too much or not enough. She walked out having proved that stillness can be louder than shouting. That clarity can be sharper than spin. That truth, when spoken with no performance, can't be unheard. She didn't need to declare victory. Because sometimes, victory isn't when they agree with you. It's when they can't ignore you anymore. And the mic? It's still on. And this time, we're all listening. So, what do you do when the world finally hears what it was never meant to hear? Do you apologize for being honest? Or do you stand still, like Jasmine did, and let the truth speak for itself? Let me ask you, have you ever been talked over, ignored, or edited out of the moment where your voice mattered most? And what would you lay on the table if the mic was on and couldn't be turned off? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us, what truth are you still holding on to? Because maybe, just maybe, this is your moment too. If this story made you pause, even for a second, to feel something, reflect on something, or remember a moment when your voice was dimmed, then don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join this space where silence isn't weakness, it's a signal. Because next time, when the mic stays on, we want it to be your voice they hear.